Caverswall Castle, a 17th century English mansion that became the home and mission of the Missionary Sisters Servants of the Holy Spirit for more than 30 years. The story began on the 15th of May 1930 when the first sisters left Style in the Netherlands for England. Rooted in the Trinitarian spirituality and empowered by the Holy Spirit, Sisters Venitze Huyens, Winifred Sandiford, Laudara Neerman and Fernanda Girse arrived in England on the same day and began their life at the SVD Mission House in Hadsar, Droitwich, Worcestershire. They helped the mission house and the missionary work by managing the kitchen and the general upkeep of the house. By 1932, the number of SVD students increased, and also more SSpS sisters were sent to Hadsar from the mother house in Style. Father Beerings, the rector at the time, and the sisters were in lookout for a house for the sisters to move in. Psalm 18 verse 30 says, "As for God, his way is perfect. He is a shield to all who trust in him." After many disappointments, they got not a house, but a castle. Thus, on the 27th of June 1933, the sisters came to live at Caverswall Castle, near Stoke-on-Trent, Staffordshire. That was the beginning of a new chapter in the history of the SSpS in England and Ireland. This renowned castle, that was partly in a neglected state, became the central part of their missionary journey for the next 30 years. It was no more of a gigantic building of bricks, but a sacred place of prayer brimming with life, love, and enthusiasm for mission. The years passed by. The memories of living in that castle is still as clear as crystal in the minds of some of our sisters who lived there after 2 decades of that historical beginning.
Well, I actually entered just after Easter in 1958, and I had a postulancy here and then the novitiate. And about half a year after the novitiate, after first vows, I went to teacher training college in London and came back here during the holiday time. And 1964, we opened a new house in Broughton, and I was sent there, and I was teaching in Swindon. So that's 1958 to 1964 I was here.
I was in Caverswall from early January 1958 to June 1964.
About 1958, after I spent 3 years in the mother house in Style, and I was appointed for Bristol. But then for one reason or another, I had to leave the Bristol community and move to the castle.
I was in Caverswall from January 1956 to November 1957 as a novice.
I was there in Caverswall from January 59 till September 64.
I came to Caverswall on the 8th of January 1959.
I went to Caverswall, I think it was on the 6th of January 1959. And I came back, the exact date I don't know, but it must have been in November 1960. So altogether I was there nearly two years.
I was in Caverswall from the 20th of July in 58 until the end of 62.
A 17th century English mansion built in a castellar style upon the foundations and within the walls of a 13th century medieval castle with acres of glorious gardens and lakes. What were the impressions of these young women when they saw their new home on arrival?
I felt great, but behind it all, there was a deep shadow. I was very apprehensive, I was very fearful.
When I came to Caverswall Castle, I was first surprised and astonished. Really, it was a castle. I liked it immediately.
I don't think that it struck me that much about being a castle. I was more interested in the atmosphere, and I found it a very quiet, prayerful atmosphere. And I just enjoyed the peace of the place.
I was actually very astonished that I would be in such a beautiful house for the novitiate, but I was happy.
My first impression was, wow, what a huge building. It's different from style.
Oh, I found it romantic and fine. We felt like princess in this old castle.
I found that very romantic. It was in winter, and the next day we had reading, and there was something like a glass house, and in that glass house there was a big tree with camellias. Oh, I found that so beautiful. The reading I forgot, but the surroundings. So this was really a very nice impression.
When I saw this big castle, I thought, my goodness, how will that look inside? And when I came inside, it was as if a stone fell on me. It was dark, very narrow passages, and I was used to open, wide corridors from style. So it really, the first impressions were not too good.
Hard physical labour was an integral part of all the sisters at Caverswall Castle. In the farm, in the garden, in the kitchen, yes, true servants of the Holy Spirit. They did all they could to earn their food, to maintain the castle and the premises, and most of all, to care for those who trusted in their love and care.
One of the main ministries was the care of elderly people who came here to retire. So there were elderly ladies, there were ladies living in the castle, and there were some ladies who were more able, who were living in the gatehouses and in the towers. And the sisters had that as a ministry, and it brought in a little income at the same time. Also, there were a number of sisters who taught in the primary school nearby. My main ministry as a young sister was cleaning the house, working in the laundry and the kitchen and on the farm. And so a lot of us were working very hard at domestic work. We didn't have servants, we were the servants.
I was in the novitiate, and then you get, every 6 months you get a different work. I was washing dishes, and I had all the dishwashings in the whole house at a time. And then I had to dust the hall and the library, and you know, these figures there in the hall and so on. That was quite a job.
We had one support, and that was we had two sisters teaching. Sister Eloise, she was from America, she was the headmistress, and Sister Claire, another sister, a young sister, was working there. This is very interesting because the school numbers grew, and she was even teaching within the castle grounds in one of the barns. She set up the tables, the chairs, everything. It was absolutely a beautiful situation.
This was a retreat house, mostly for day retreats, because there was no room for retreats for people to stay here. But they came nearly every Sunday. There was a retreat day, so that was a very busy weekend for us. The retreatants would arrive and immediately be greeted with a cup of tea, coffee, biscuits, so that all had to be washed up. Then they would have a conference and pray. Then there would be a dinner, full 3-course dinner, which had to be cooked and served, and then they'd go and pray another little bit, and then there'd be an afternoon tea before they left. So our Sundays were really very, very busy. But I think people appreciated that they had a quiet spot to come to.
When I came, I was with Sister Regina in the chapel. I had not much to do there, but I had to prepare the vestments the evening before and to do the cleaning. In the second section, I was appointed to serve the ladies in the tower. There were towers, and I had to take care of one tower, to take up the coals and to make the fire, and that was not so easy at all, because there was sometimes wind or storm, and it was really hard to keep the fire burning. And in the third section, I was on the farm and in the garden, and that were the jobs I liked with all my heart.
I arrived with the thought, I'm going to study English, I'm going to be a teacher, and I'm going to Papua New Guinea. That's what I've said from the day I entered Style. And so the first weeks in Caverswall, I was given a book, and I should study English because the school year hadn't started yet. And I went through the moat all around, and I sometimes looked outside. I thought, oh my goodness, it reminds me of home. I get homesick. No, I cannot get homesick because I want to go to Papua New Guinea. And so I studied most of the time, but there was always one word: work. We worked in the garden. I worked with the hay for the cows. We had 2 or 3 cows. In the moat there were lots of flowers which had to be looked after to keep the surrounding nice.
Life wasn't a bed of roses at Caverswall Castle. It had its ups and downs. But in keeping with the words of their founder, St. Arnold Jansen, the sisters were prepared to have much vinegar poured into the wine of their lives.
I didn't find it difficult in the castle. I think I was at home immediately. We were in the beginning 9 novices and then 7, and a small group, and that made it homely.
I had a very bad experience with rheumatism. I was only 19 at the time, I think. I was working in the kitchen, and it used to get very hot there. In fact, you could see the condensation rolling down the walls, and I'd get very overheated. And then in the middle of the morning, we were all called to the conservatory, which was quite cold, and there we would peel potatoes for an hour and listen to spiritual reading. So this was constantly happening. I was going from the kitchen to the conservatory and then back into the kitchen, and I developed very, very bad rheumatism. But that was a very difficult time for me because I couldn't, I was young. I was used to sort of literally running around, and but I was had to be inactive for a while and in terrible pain.
Coming home from school, change and go into the garden or on the farm with the hay, when the hay time was on, or with the sister Tacita, who had a knife. We went into one part of the paddock to cut the rushes. And that was so hard work that I sometimes, when I had to study in the evening, I fell with my head over on the table because I couldn't keep my eyes open anymore. That was really one of the real difficulties I had.
There were a bunch of sisters who had great courage, vision, and never complained about hard work, because I must mention that, and I said everything was so beautiful. But there was one thing, and that was hard work. There was never a moment where we didn't work, where we didn't really work at giving our last ounces of strength. I grumbled at times, very especially on a Sunday, because there was another sister who was in charge of the groups of young people coming for the weekends, and that always happened on a Saturday or on a Sunday. And when we came back from college, or wherever we came back from as young sisters, especially for me, it was just a grind, and I grumbled, but I only was reprimanded. It was hard to take.
I was in the stage of learning, so everything personally for me was something new, and I just was with it and tried to do my best. I was just happy, and so I did not feel really in my novitiate any pressure or something. I can't remember. I just grew up into the religious life, which was my desire since I was 10 years of age.
I enjoyed being in Caverswall. I was just only a novice, and I felt very quickly at home, although I knew very, very little English. But the community of 8 novices was a good community. I felt at ease there. I was very happy to be there.
We arrived at the 8th of January, and we had a train journey nearly up to the evening, but we were still, all of us got seasick. So we were so like that, and we came in the evening on, and we had evening meal with all, and they said there's also a ghost. You need not to be afraid, but there's a ghost in the castle. And then we went to our cells. We had beautiful white curtains, and then the cell was the bed and little night. So big was the cell, just as the bed was, and in between there's these white curtains. And then in the middle of the night, somebody started, and because we had said there's a ghost, I wanted to get up, but I was so tired. I heard it, but I couldn't get up. And then was even a knocking, and then suddenly the door opened, and a white figure moved through. And again, I wanted to get her or him, and I couldn't get up. I was too tired. And then we heard a soothing voice, and then this white person went out again, and the ghost was away. And in the next morning, so as soon as we had talking, we had no silence usually. I had to wait till we were allowed to talk. And then I said that the ghost had to come just the first night. I find very awful. And one sister got such a red face. And Emanuela smoothed down, and then so it was one of the novices who had Rheuma at this time, and Emanuela herself, she lived beside, she went in and helped her, and then the ghost was silent. So So when somebody said, there's a ghost, we said, okay, it's okay.
In summer we had to make hay, and we as novices we were not allowed to put on a working dress, but we had to put the working dress on top of the blue dress, and that was hot. And the rakes which they have were much heavier than we had them at home. I always thought if I could ask my father to send me a nice rake, but certainly that was not allowed. That was difficult, physically difficult.
Living in a mansion did not compromise the call to live their vow of evangelical poverty. Poverty was a reality within the walls of the renowned Caverswall Castle. The sisters placed themselves and all they had, their time, talents, work and community goods, at the service of their missionary tasks.
Stories I heard about them was that their real poverty they lived in, and there used to be very little food here, so they were eating the nettles out of the garden. I mean, nowadays that's supposed to be very healthy, but in their day nobody ate nettles out of the garden, but that was sort of their daily food. And I think when they first arrived here in the house, it was in a dreadful state. None of them really liked it. They'd already found a much nicer house where they could have lived. But they didn't really have a choice in the matter, because the decisions were made by the sisters in the mother house and the Divine Word missionaries.
Well, there was poverty, that's right. But afterwards, I was happy that I had this experience, because when I came to Taiwan, it was much poorer. The sisters were all, those who were there were a few young ones, and the others were the old ones from China, the old missionaries from China. And the experience from the mainland China for them was poverty. And so the old sister didn't want anything new, anything nice. Poverty was for them, I suppose, that what made missionary life. And so I was used to poverty. The experience in Caverswall, the poverty, the simplicity, that formed me for my missionary life in Taiwan. And for that I'm rather grateful.
We lived outside in the barns. It was a real barn. The machinery was taken away and the beds were all in a row. And down below was just one pipe running through, but there was a little bit of heat and no more. It was a damp and a wet place. And when I came back from my studies at weekends or so, I can remember myself one night, I literally sat there on my bed and I cried because I couldn't stand it. And another time, I put my nightie along the pipe, and about 2 days, and you could see the steam rising. 2 days after, my superior called me and she said, "Sister Agnes, what about you being such a weakling?" And I said, "What about it?" She said, "You know what you are doing there in the dormitory? Putting your nightie over the thing to get that comfort." I said nothing. Deep down, I felt very hurt because I was feeling very wet and damp in my bed. It was painful.
I have not much experience that we ever interacted with our neighbors. That time was so different than it is nowadays. We did go to the church when, in case we had no mass in the chapel, in our own chapel, but otherwise we did not go over the bridge unless we had to go to see the doctor.
I liked Caverswall from the first moment. I really enjoyed being in Caverswall. What struck me was the poverty in Caverswall itself. It was less than I had expected.
The sisters lived all very, very poor, and four of us. We had our beds, we had our washing bowl. But it was so cold. After washing in the evening, I put all my stockings and dresses again on. Dress not, but all trousers and stockings, because it was so cold. In the mornings, ice was frozen, and it was also a little bit open. The whole night came the. It was very dangerous for the health also. At that time I didn't feel, perhaps later came out. But we did it, you know. And the superiors, they also lived very poor.
I was once sick, and I remember, I think I must have slept in the barn in the, what do you call that, where the horses had been before, and I felt really very, very miserable. And actually the castle from inside, our sleeping places and working places were very, very simple.
The sisters were all working very, very hard because Caverswall was very, very poor. They really had to work to earn the food first of all. Yes, 2 sisters were in the school, but for the rest, yeah, the old ladies were in the house. I don't know how much they paid, but the poverty was tangible.
Caverswall Castle, the castle that came to be called the home of the Missionary sisters, servants of the Holy Spirit. After 32 years, on the 1st of September 1965, the sisters bid farewell to Caverswall Castle.
It was a very nice experience starting my missionary work. It was I liked Caverswall, and I was really happy. It was a small novitiate, not so big than like here in style, and I think not so conservative. And that formed me for my whole life.
I would say it was very positive. I must say you could really live. The sisters were helping each other when there was some kind of trouble. The sisters stood in for each other and stood up for each other. It was marvelous that way.
For me, going later on to Ghana, it was a good experience to learn another language, and also to just interact with other cultures.
I thought Caverswall was wonderful. For me, Caverswall was not an old place. For me, Caverswall was alive. And even it was for me so hard to leave Caverswall. After I got the visa for India, it came all pretty fast. And I must say, I will never forget England. And it was for me the preparation for India.
For me, it was a happy time, full of wonders, of new experience inside, and waiting for what was coming more.
Novitiate in Caverswall was a happy time, in spite of all the difficult things and the poverty and whatever. It was just, and I think the nature around this castle has done something to it.
On the whole, I was really very happy in Caverswall. At the beginning, I felt lonely because coming here out of style, out of the novitiate, and nobody really, looking after me, so to speak, as it was done in the novitiate. I felt that in the beginning, but it soon went. When I really got into work, it was okay.
More than half a century later, the sisters recall their life and mission at Caverswall Castle with nostalgia and fondness. chronicled in the chapters of their lives. They were not mere dates and events, but cherished memories of a unique past, a milestone in their missionary journey, and experiences on which their lives were built upon. Experiences that inspire and encourage those of us who listen to those voices.